Yo, listen up, I got a story about a teacher, Mr. Wright, yeah, he's a biology creature. In the classroom, he's spitting knowledge like a preacher. With his lab coat on, he's the lyrical feature. He's got test tubes and beakers mixing up that potion, teaching us about cells and the process of mitosis.
Hi Year 11s, so this is our video on 2.7, which is the innate immune system. We'll go launch straight into this. You have semi-covered this in class already, so off we go. So the innate immune system we also sometimes refer to as the non-specific immune system, and it comes into effect whenever any pathogens come into our body or gain access to the body. It's going to involve non-specific immune responses such as white blood cells, the complement system, interferons, inflammation, and fever. And as you can probably expect, we're going to talk about all of these independently. So, starting off by talking about white blood cells, also called leukocytes. White blood cells are involved in our innate immune system, as we just said. There's three different types we need to know about. You need to know about phagocytes, cytotoxic cells, and inflammatory cells. Phagocytes are white blood cells that recognize, ingest, and kill microbes. Phage meaning almost to eat, or phagocytosis, cell eating. Lots of different types of phagocytes in the body, including neutrophils, macrophages, and monocytes. We then have our cytotoxic cells. A good example of those, as we often refer to, is the natural killer cells. And the purpose of these cytotoxic cells, or the natural killer cells, is to recognize and kill cells that have been infected with pathogens. We also have inflammatory cells, which are white blood cells that release chemical messengers and recruit phagocytes and antibody-secreting cells and cytotoxic cells to an area where you've got pathogens or infections. These white blood cells and other types of white blood cells are constantly circulating throughout our circulatory system and our lymphatic systems, and as well as being found between the areas between cells. They're just kind of waiting to be called up for when they're needed. Moving on to the complement system. The complement system is made up of around 25 different proteins. These proteins are found in blood and they support the innate immune system. The job of complement proteins is to attract and support white blood cells wherever infection is. There are other complement proteins that aren't involved in supporting white blood cells. These ones are responsible for destroying cell membranes and cell walls of any pathogens that have actually come into our bodies. Moving on to interferons. So interferons are a special type of protein, a signaling protein, that are involved again in the non-specific response to pathogens. So this is our body's way of trying to fight off infection before we know what the infection is. They're secreted by cells that have become infected by a virus. So if a virus infects a cell, that cell starts to release signaling proteins called interferons. And the job of these interferons is to activate other proteins that will inhibit the viral replication in that infected cell. They also activate white blood cells, like phagocytes and cytotoxic cells, to come to the site of infection. Lastly, we're going to look at inflammation. So inflammation is the term that we use to describe a response when white blood cells and complement proteins are brought into a damaged side of the body, so where you've got cuts or an infection. And inflammation will occur through one big process. So when chemical messages such as histamines are released by damaging tissues and inflammatory cells, the messengers will increase blood flow to the damaged tissue and increase the permeability of blood cells and large molecules and signal phagocytes and cytotoxic cells. Blood will contain clotting proteins and white blood cells that will help fight pathogens and repair the wound, and the skin will swell and turn red as the blood flows to that area. Phagocytes called neutrophils will respond to those chemical messengers and they'll arrive at the damaged site. They'll ingest the pathogen and the dead cell through phagocytosis. Larger phagocytes, which we call macrophages, macro meaning large, phage meaning to eat again, so large macrophages, will be recruited more slowly because they're larger to the infected area, and they'll also undertake phagocytosis. Blood will then clot and the wound begins to heal. As the wound heals, that swelling or the inflammation begins to slow down. Two more slides left for this. So going into that process, we've talked about phagocytosis quite a bit. As I said, phagocytosis literally means cell eating. There's also another term called pinocytosis. We looked at both of these a little bit in the cells topic. Phagocytosis, this is occurs when the phagocyte recognizes a pathogen. the membrane of that phagocyte fuses with the membrane of the pathogen, and the pathogen then becomes trapped inside a vesicle inside the phagocyte. That membrane-enclosed vesicle we call a phagosome. Lysosome, remember that's just a vesicle containing digestive enzymes, will then fuse with the phagosome. Lysosomes, not only just digestive enzymes, but also acids and oxidizers, release all of those chemicals, and they will digest or decompose the pathogen, and then the phagocyte will absorb all useful material, releasing the waste back out into the extracellular environment through exocytosis. Our last one that we want to talk about, fever. Fever is the term we use to describe the increase in body temperature. Phagocytes, called macrophages, talked about them last time, release chemical messengers called pyrogens. Now you can probably tell pyrogens are the ones that are going to help with temperature. So pyrogens act to raise the temperature of the body, which induces fever. Fever increases the rate of phagocytosis, but it also reduces the rate of growth of viruses and bacteria because the virus and bacteria have adapted to evolve to our general body temperature. So anytime we're increasing that body temperature, we are decreasing the efficiency of the virus or the bacteria.